Another story that we had this week from you could turn into a court case relatively soon, or is a court case in a certain regard, but might this particular change might add fuel to it. Is also out of California, which is that the state removed H&K's popular USP handgun lineup from the Safe Guns roster. Can you give us a little more detail about what happened and what it means?
Yeah. So it's pretty sudden. No one really had any warning. It just a bulletin was distributed by the California DOJ to all the FFLs in the state, essentially listing by model all of the USPs that were remaining on California's handgun roster, saying that they were no longer certified and thus could no longer be sold legally in the state. And it failed to elaborate why, and just deferred everyone's questions to H&K.
Yeah, it's weird, right? They're removing USPs from this list of guns that you're allowed to buy in California, which for people who don't know is they have a list called the handgun roster, which is supposed to list safe handguns that can be legally bought by Californians. They have to have a number of different features, but they removed these guns from that list and then didn't say why. They said, go talk to H&K,
right?
Which is kind of weird. You reached out to both, but you didn't hear anything substantive back from either one, right?
Yeah, H&K never responded, and then the California DOJ just reiterated their bulletin that they sent out to the FFLs to me. So we don't have a lot of clarity on what could have caused this. Under state law, there's a couple reasons why a handgun might get removed from a roster. One is just that a company that has an approved handgun fails to pay California's annual fee associated with the privilege of having their handgun on the roster. So that's a possibility, and that could be why they're deferring people to H&K. We don't know. A couple of the other criteria is that a gun maker might alter the design of a handgun that was previously approved, and once it's been altered, it no longer qualifies as approved on the roster. And then third, the state can just suddenly decide, upon further review, this actually isn't a safe handgun, and therefore it can't be sold in the state anymore. So a little unclear as to what happened here with the USPs. Nothing has really changed with the USPs since they've been approved. So it's tough to say for sure what happened to get them all kicked off the list.
Yeah, and we should get into a little bit of why I think this might embolden the legal challenges to the handgun roster or create new ones.
Sure. Yeah. So California's handgun roster law goes back to 2001, but over time it has kind of gradually ratcheted up with what criteria is involved in getting approved for sale.
Right.
Particularly with their most recent addition of microstamping requirements. For those of you who don't know, microstamping in theory is the idea that a gun's firing pin will imprint a unique symbol basically on the primer or the primer of a spent shell casing, and that supposedly will help law enforcement be able to associate a shell casing found at a crime scene or whatever with a particular gun. The only problem is
I think they want to put imprinted on two different parts somehow.
I think so too. Yeah.
As well.
Basically, the only problem with that is it's a pretty fickle technology. It's not really worked out yet. No one's really been able to master it. And as a result,
nobody makes these guns, right? Nobody anywhere in the world makes a gun that has microstamping technology in it. Right?
Correct. Yeah. Nothing that's commercially available as far as I'm aware. And so because of that, all these new guns that come out don't meet California's requirements and can't be added to the list. And so I believe not a single new gun has been added to the list since 2013 or 2014. Mm-hmm. So
that's 8 years.
That's 8 years where nothing has been added. But as you see, they can, overnight take a whole sweeping list of approved pistols off the list.
Yeah. From a major manufacturer too.
Yeah.
H&K is not some small company.
Right. H&K is a very popular gun maker. The USP is a very popular line of guns. And the fact that they also passed another addition to this roster, it hasn't gone into effect yet, but it will this summer, where if they ever get around to approving another handgun, the state automatically must remove 3 models or 3 handguns for every additional handgun they do approve. So you just get a diminishing supply.
Which has a lot to do with safety somehow.
Yeah, I guess
like 3 previous guns that were deemed safe by the state are no longer safe because they added a new model.
Right. Right.
which there's not a lot of logic in there. I don't. But I mean, of course, I think a lot of people would question the very concept of this safe handgun roster because who's exempted from the, from this list?
Right. Yeah. As usual, law enforcement is exempt, so they are allowed to own and carry unsafe handguns around the state.
Right. Right. Which makes very little sense if your goal is if your interest here is about the safety of the handgun involved. Right. And then obviously the vast majority of other states do not have such a roster. There are a couple states though that do have. There are a couple other ones that have rosters, but they treat theirs a little differently, right? Yeah.
Maryland and Massachusetts both have handgun rosters. But just my cursory review of theirs, the guns that they seem to have included on their prohibited roster list are like really old and really cheap pistols. So kind of a bias towards what they think are crime guns, essentially, are the ones that aren't allowed to be owned. But they have most of the new models get added to their list as long as they're compliant with things like the magazine capacity restrictions and whatnot.
Right.
So it's just California's that has this sort of arbitrary tapering down over time.
Yeah, and so as we see these legal challenges pile up in California and have more success, and we see the Supreme Court moving in a more conservative direction, potentially, this particular regulation, because it's so close to Heller, which was about the banning of handguns,
right?
It seems prime for another Supreme Court crack at this whole situation. And so that'll be very interesting to watch. I think we're going to see movement on that if they continue to push things in this direction, especially.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still California is huge. It's a massive state with a lot of people in it and a lot of gun owners. And so these companies are still making these older generation guns like Glock. I think the last one approved was Gen 3, and now their most modern ones are Gen 5. But they're still producing those older ones to sell in California because it's still a big market. Maybe sometime down the line too, you might see more industry resistance to policies like this if they continue to remove guns from the approved list, because they could always refuse to sell to California law enforcement or service the guns that they've sold them. There's all kinds of things the industry could do if it wanted to sort of, go full force against this. I think we were more likely to see a legal challenge succeed before something like that happens. But we'll keep a watch, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. This provides great fodder for an interesting lawsuit because does this qualify as a de facto handgun ban over time if you're just whittling away the supply of what you can buy and not adding anything? And there's already a pending legal challenge from the Firearms Policy Coalition over this provision. So it's already getting started.
I will say that the California Supreme Court, the state court, did uphold the roster in a previous case. So, they have had some success in defending the law thus far. But the question is really how far can they push this before especially the federal courts start to really step in and take notice.